Welcome into the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, a Wednesday edition, May 28th. Joe, I think we are in the dog days of the NFL offseason at this point, but still plenty to discuss in the fantasy football world. Got some best ball drafts fired up. I know you're working on a best ball series for the site. Last week, we talked about some guys who could disappoint this season, some players we will tending to be staying away from. We're doing the opposite this week, talking about some guys who could make a leap, guys we like at their current ADPs. We will get to our respective lists in a moment, but first we are brought to you, as always, by the Circa Resort and Casino out in Las Vegas. The ultimate fantasy football draft can only take place in Vegas. Circa Resort and Casino wants to bring your whole league to Las Vegas with the ultimate fantasy football experience giveaway. The winner brings your 12-person league for a 2-night stay at Circa, and you get to have your draft at a cabana down at Stadium Swim. Plus, you'll get limo transportation to and from the airport, a welcome party at the Legacy Club, a booth at the world's largest sportsbook, and more. There's no better place to draft than Circa. 21 and up, go to circalasvegas.com for more information. All right, Joe. So I am curious to see how you took this exercise. I kept it intentionally vague because what I didn't want this to be is us just naming random dudes who are going in round 17 and saying, yeah, he could finish round 11 value. I want to keep it, to some more familiar names, but essentially players who we think could improve their numbers or improve their fantasy ranking relative to last season. So I think it's easy for this to skew toward younger players. I tried to stay away from rookies because they could break out, but we don't have a sample of them at the NFL level. But tell me about your methodology. Again, there's no wrong answer here. I was interested to see the kind of list that you put together.
Yeah. First, how dare you, Nick? Because whenever I was assigned in high school, your open-ended writing assignments, those are the ones I hated the most.
Oh yeah.
No,
I'm sure things were tough at Chilton High School.
Well, don't besmirch Chilton High School and teachers. Love all you guys out there. No, I needed the railroad of sorts to write about stuff. And Joe in high school is a lot different than Joe as a semi-functioning adult. So unfortunately, it was still a bit of a struggle. And the way I interpreted you saying, hey, look for guys that could be risers, it wasn't really the YouTube title of players set to take a leap, right? That would be like Sam Laporta, his rookie year, or something like that, some crazy ADP. I was assuming it'd be more like guys who will absolutely outperform their ADP or at minimum give you a safe floor at their current ADP. So my idea was it's building blocks. It's roster building blocks, much in the same way we're avoiding the pitfalls of last week's show where basically James Cook was the free square of this guy will definitely not produce the same way he did last year. Is that built into his ADP? I wanted the inverse of that. So I ended up having about 10 different names. I did have some rookies included in that mix. Now, I would say while we're doing this show at the very end of May, I would not be surprised at all if the ADP of these rookies changes come August and certainly by the end of August. Like I think very unequivocally, RJ Harvey and Caleb Johnson will have their ADPs dramatically different. But we've had a lot of discussion about those guys. There are other podcasts on this network that talk about those guys too. So I'm fine if we just ignore the rookies in this list.
I don't think we have to fully ignore the rookies. We'll hit on them as we go through, but I will let you lead off. I feel like I went through like half of my list last week before we got to any of your players. So who do you want to start with? And again, explain why this player landed on your list.
So I shouldn't say Trevor Lawrence first, given it's you as a Jags fan.
We could start with the Jags. We can always start Jags.
I've done a bunch of best balls over the Memorial Day weekend. I was having a lot of fun doing I think it was the Houtzer or whatever it is, an underdog half point PPR setting. I think of the 5 that I did over the course of Sunday and Monday, I either picked 10, 11, or 12 in every one of them. I thought it was very interesting that you could put a South best ball group together. Would it be Baker Mayfield, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans? That was one of the stacks that I made. Brian Thomas, Travis Hunter, Brenton Strange, Travis Etienne. You could go full degenerate Jag stack as well too. And even from the Saints perspective, it's very easy to do like a Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Tyler Shuck, if you really hated yourself to the degree that I seem to do over that. I think Trevor Lawrence is the answer. And I mentioned the 5 best balls because no matter if we're drafting at the end of May, middle of June, preparing for your drafts come August, my best ball exposure at minimum is going to be like 40 or 50% Trevor Lawrence. He's a free space in my mind at the quarterback spot at quarterback 14, 15, 16. And I think it's very safe to say a guy that we thought was going to be a transcendent quarterback prospect is now entering the best situation of his career, whether it be Brian Thomas, who emerged last year. I don't buy the Travis Hunter love. We talked about that last week as much as some people, but at minimum, he's a good wide receiver too. And I think Brenton Strange is going to be fine. I loved the addition from a football perspective of Bashal Tutin. I don't think he replaces Travis Etienne. But overall, that Jags offense is going to be better. And they have Liam Cohen, who has made similar situations far more fantasy lucrative. So I'm all the way bought in that at least in best ball, knowing I'm getting whatever production that week in, week out of Trevor Lawrence, I want to have that as my quarterback too. And frankly, I don't mind builds where he's the quarterback 1. And you can have Jordan Love, Jared Goff, Michael Penix. I like a lot of quarterback 20-ish, right? Like all those guys, if I partner with, now I want to have 3 in this particular build if Trevor Lawrence is my quarterback 1. But there is going to be plenty of best ball exposure for Trevor Lawrence this year, where I think we're already drafting him at the floor, and the ceiling is maybe even quarterback 6 or 7 or 8 in that Baker Mayfield, Bo Nix range that we're seeing right now.
Music to my ears, Joe. Everything you said to me is accurate. It's maybe slightly optimistic just because I've been beaten down for so long. But I think not only is Trevor Lawrence in pretty clearly the best situation of his career, and I know we're saying that before we've even seen Liam Cohen, coach a game as a head coach in the NFL, but just the vibe alone is significantly better than it's been at any point throughout his career. Like you could argue that even if Liam Cohen ends up just being a good NFL head coach as opposed to a great head coach, that is still a huge upgrade over the complete disaster that was Urban Meyer and the disaster that Doug Peterson devolved into by the end of his tenure in Jacksonville. Like you could argue that he's never even had like anything close to a good situation with the Jags. So I'm with you by default. I think you said it right as far as the ceiling. Like there is not a QB3, QB4 type of ceiling for Trevor Lawrence. To me, if he's giving you like Jared Goff type of numbers, Jared Goff type of fantasy finishes, that's great. Yeah, absolutely. That's great. But, right now at the NFFC, we've had 27 drafts essentially in the month of May. He's the QB 19. He's free. He's basically free. And, I think if he's your safety net second quarterback in redraft, if he's one of 2 or 3 later round quarterbacks you take a stab on in best ball and you take the spike weeks, totally fine with that. I also had Etienne on my list. Nothing really to add there. I think we're just 2 down on him. I'm not really vibing with this idea that Bashal Tutin is going to be that much of a factor. He's already having fumble issues early in camp for the Jags. Like Liam Cohen made a point to say that during a presser last week. Who knows on Tank Bigsby? I think Etienne to me is still clearly the best of those 3 options. And then Brenton Strange, man, like if we're looking for a true borderline breakout candidate, I think he's probably the best bet of those 3. They were comfortable parting ways with Evan Ingram, who played really well for them when he was healthy. They were comfortable doing that for a reason. You look at some of the yards per route run numbers were really good last year for Brenton Strange. The target share numbers were really good.
The draft capital invested in him too. It's just, like all those conventional things would point to Strange. Yeah.
And a lot of that came with Mac Jones.
Right. And the only one I'd say is, so Strange is also effectively Brenton Strange. We could get really weird if we keep saying Strange is the last name only. Brenton Strange, the tight end, is also effectively free in best ball. He's like either 15, 16, 17 in terms of your round pick. And I think in redraft, he probably will be free. I would imagine most leagues aren't getting to that level of tight end depth anyway. Liam Cohen's Buccaneers offense didn't really use Cade Otton until a bunch of injuries had occurred. So that's the one like safety net, or sorry, like that's the one pump the brakes a little bit. Not you, but just overall, like, hey, there is no roadblock in front of it other than the offensive scheme. Last year didn't really use Cade Otton until multiple injuries occurred. That's still fine because we're talking about a starting tight end that doesn't have much competition in an offense that we think will be better in a division that's not very good. That's the other selling point best ball wise in my mind. Hey, I don't know what Jacksonville will be this year. I don't know what the win-loss total will be. I don't feel comfortable putting a number on that yet. I think that division is once again not going to be great. And if this is one of the better offenses, if this is even Tampa Bay light from last year, that's a great spot to have a tight end who is effectively free in best ball.
All right. Who's next up on your list?
So if there's the Liam Cohen tax that's not being presented offensively, there is a Ben Johnson Bears tax that is being applied to all players, whether it be Caleb Williams. I think DeAndre Swift is to a lesser extent, certainly Luther Burden. I think Colston Loveland's getting that tax applied to him. We're not seeing that with DJ Moore. And I don't understand what we're doing with this conversation. If we think Luther Burden is going to be the Amon-Ra St. Brown to the Lions offense from last year, fair enough. But you don't draft Colston Loveland 10 overall if you plan to have him split time with Cole Kmet. I think it's going to be a lot of 12 personnel from the Lions, with the Bears, which you saw with the Lions often when the Lions could run that 12 personnel with Ben Johnson. And I think Loveland and Cole Kmet on the field then necessitate it will be Rome Odunze and it will be DJ Moore. And if you're thinking, oh, well, DJ Moore can't do that, I don't know why. I mean, like, we've seen DJ Moore produce with the Panthers, bad iterations of the Bears offense. We've seen that happen too. And St. Brown last year for the Lions played 387 snaps in the slot, 498 outside. That was pretty similar to what DJ Moore did for the Bears. Maybe it's a bit more outside, but like, it's not just St. Brown's playing 90% in the slot. You'd use your best receiver all over the field. Guess what, Nick? DJ Moore is the Bears' best receiver and can be utilized in much of the same way. If you get St. Brown usage for DJ Moore, which everyone's just assuming, I think incorrectly, it won't happen. We're talking about a guy that we're going to draft probably 14, 15, 16 overall next year, because we have the Caleb Williams bump, the Ben Johnson bump, and now slot DJ Moore, which is going to happen more. I don't buy the Luther Burden part of it. I understand the draft capital invested. I think it's more of a safety net and protection for the offense if injuries were to occur. It is not Luther Burden will automatically be the slot receiver and they're going to have 3 receivers on the field. It doesn't make sense to me. I think DJ Moore is going to be that St. Brown role. And again, I just went 387 snaps last year for St. Brown, the snap at 498 outside. It wasn't like he was just only a slot receiver. So I assume DJ Moore is going to do the same sort of role for the Bears this season.
So what kind of upside are we talking if this comes to fruition for DJ Moore? Finished as the wide receiver 16 last year in total value. And of course, did not miss any games. So on a per game basis, does slide a little bit.
I think it's going to be like wide receiver 8, 9, 10. And again, I'm imagining that to be where we're taking Lab McConkey, Marvin Harrison this year, that back into the second round. That's like the worst case scenario for DJ Moore if he's used like Amon-Ra St. Brown was in the Lions offense. I think it'll be very easily a top 20 pick next year if he's used in the St. Brown role, which I still believe and I contend he will be perfectly positioned for that.
I think that's a good one. That's a really good one because like for me, he was already like too high up the board where you're thinking, all right, we already know he's good, right? But could another breakout be coming? I think a breakout within a new offense is a really good way to frame that, and totally realistic that he could be, a top 8 or 9 wide receiver this season. I'm going to go to a significantly less flashy name, less flashy organization. Well, kind of like they try to be flashy, but they're not really flashy. Can I tell you Jakobi Meyers? One of my favorite players, somebody I've rostered a ton over the last couple of years. We have a quarterback upgrade by default. We have a possible head coaching upgrade, a likely head coaching upgrade in Pete Carroll, although we'll get into what that could mean from a kind of a play split competitiveness standpoint. But Jakobi Meyers finished as the wide receiver 19 in PPR last year. That was despite playing in a terrible offense that had 0 running game whatsoever. Now they were playing from behind a ton. They did throw the ball a ton, so that's part of it. He also missed 2 games. He's now being drafted as the wide receiver 39. Better quarterback, better situation, not really too much increased target competition. They brought in a couple of rookies. Obviously you expect Brock Bowers to still be a target hog for them, but he did that with Brock Bowers last year. And as you have said on this very show, you don't know if there's going to be another significant leap coming for Brock Bowers in terms of that fantasy volume. You're right. So why is Jakobi Meyers going 20 spots lower at receiver than he was, or than his finish last year? Excuse me.
I think it's so funny that he's like one of your favorite players.
He's the best.
I mean, like there is value in the floor. I was having this conversation with somebody when they're making fun of my round 15 Wan'Dale Robinson. I'm like, I don't think Robinson's good. And frankly, if Wan'Dale Robinson, my best ball leagues, is scoring more than 3 to 4 weeks, I'm probably like 10 or 11 anyway. But in the event that all my receivers are injured or there's bye week shenanigans or anything else like that, and Wan'Dale Robinson gets me 10 points 2 weeks, there's nothing wrong with that. And that's the equivalent of what I think Jakobi Meyers is, only like a 7-round difference. And you could say that for Josh Downs. I've had the conversation with a lot of folks as well too. I think there's an argument to be said that Jayden Reed or Matthew Golden could have a similar sort of like, that's your floor from a PPR perspective. And they're all kind of in that range. The Chip Kelly offensive scheme for the Raiders, I think, isn't going to be the Chip Kelly Eagles one that we saw, nor do I think it's going to be Chip Kelly with Ohio State last year. Both those are completely different spots than where the Raiders are this year. And maybe Geno Smith is a better quarterback than I tend to acknowledge. I don't really think he's that much of an elevator. And frankly, I think you kind of have to play around the deficiencies of Geno Smith as opposed to saying, here's what Geno Smith does well. Let's go ahead and add or accentuate to those things. I don't think Jakobi Meyers benefits in that scenario. I don't think Brock Bowers does. I actually think if you're playing to the weaknesses of Geno, you want this to be a ball controlled offense. You want to run the ball pretty heavily. That's why you draft Ashton Genty, number 8 overall. That's why you sign a few of the linemen that they did. That's why you keep your competitive defense around, because in the AFC West, you're not winning games 31-21. You're going to be winning games 20-17. I think that's where the Pete Carroll emphasis adds to it too. So there are going to be times in redraft where I think if I'm trying to do if I end up getting the 6th pick and I take Jahmyr Gibbs and Jonathan Taylor, there's going to be value in saying, I know I'm getting 10 points in full point PPR from Jakobi Meyers as my wide receiver 3 in round 9. It's certainly not sexy, and I don't know if there's a ceiling to that, but I agree that you could comfortably say Meyers will play to about where his ADP at least is in best ball.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think there's just a little bit more meat on the bone. I think he continues to be underrated every year. We were saying it going into last season, and I think he's going to beat the ADP again. I mean, I think the pushback is what you mentioned as far as, is this going to be more of a ball control offense? Raiders were top 5 in the NFL in terms of like total pass attempts last year. But I went back and looked, like 2023 Seahawks, Pete Carroll's last year there, they were right in the middle of the league, 15th in terms of total pass attempts. So I even if there is a reduction in volume, even if they're not playing from behind,
that comes more at the expense of Bowers.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong. I think there's situationally, I mean, it's a little Jerry Jeudy-ish, right? Where it's like, okay, if the team is more competitive and you're not constantly having to huck the ball around and try to make these big plays, maybe that does hurt him in a roundabout way. But Jakobi Meyers also had like 14 red zone targets last year. Like he was lucky to score 4 touchdowns. So even if you're a little bit skeptical of the overall volume, I do think this team will be better positioned, and he could be closer to the 8 touchdowns from 2 years ago as opposed to 4 last year. All right, back to you. Who you got next?
So I'm sticking in the NFC North, and I'm going to go with TJ Hockenson. So last year comes back from the nasty knee injury. Thanks, Kirby Joseph. Actually performs pretty well relative to a lot of people who come back from knee injuries. I thought TJ Hockenson towards the second half of the season was pretty resurgent. And if you look back to 2023, when he was effectively healthy for the Vikings, 95 receptions, 950 yards, 6 touchdowns. 2 years ago, that was tight end 2 or 3, depending on your scoring range. It was like Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, and then TJ Hockenson, and then a wide gulf between TJ Hockenson and the Evan Ingram, David Njoku's of the world. There is nothing in the Vikings offense that has changed from 2 years ago to now in terms of what McConnell wants to do. And other than the quarterback play, which I think is fair to say there's some concerns, at least I do, of JJ McCarthy, even if you're getting a baseline level of Viking quarterback from the past 2 years, you can safely assume TJ Hockenson is probably going to be producing a top 5, top 6 tight end numbers. Now, he is being drafted around tight end 5 or 6. But the difference is, if he ends up being tight end 3 or 4, what is the value in relation to where he's being drafted to Trey McBride, who's a top 35 pick, and Brock Bowers, who's a top 15, top 20 pick? Like if you're getting 85% of Bowers or McBride production at a 7th round, 8th round ADP, that's a premium value. And I don't think people are recognizing that. And more importantly, I would rather have Hockenson over Jonnu Smith. I like Evan Ingram, and actually he's on this list too if I want to tie it in together, but I'd much rather have Hockenson a round or a round and a half ahead of Evan Ingram. I like Hockenson more than George Kittle, who goes like 2 rounds ahead of it. So I think Hockenson, if you look at from 2 years ago what the Vikings did, I don't know how anything is different for TJ Hockenson than where we're at currently now, other than the quarterback play, which a lot of people weren't saying Kirk Cousins was all that great anyway.
All right, I'm going to stay in the NFC North as well, Joe, and go to the Green Bay Packers. I'm going to throw out Jayden Reed because I think the talent is there. I think the opportunity is certainly there. I think the Packers need him to be closer to the player that he was in the first half of the season compared to the second half if they're going to get to where they think they can. First 9 weeks of last season, Jayden Reed, wide receiver 10 in PPR. The rest of the way, wide receiver 52. He is currently the wide receiver 42 at the NFFC. Matthew Golden, by the way, wide receiver 47, not too far behind. I think even if you say you split the difference and Jayden Reed is not the guy who was having those big explosive games early on, he's not, wide receiver 10. Yeah, that's probably unrealistic. I also don't think he's a wide receiver 52. I think if we just say he finishes somewhere in the middle of that and he's, the wide receiver 25, the wide receiver 28, that's still a market improvement on where he's going right now.
I would rather have Jayden Reed than Jakobi Myers. I mean, like that's where I'm looking at, because
depends on the format for me, but yeah, I think that's
fair.
That's
fair. And there's nuance to this conversation. I would actually argue I would be fine with Matthew Golden or Jayden Reed on my roster for the same premise. Like, one of these two players is going to have a consequential role from a fantasy perspective. I think every one of that trio, and I'm including Romeo Doubs in this mix, is going to be consequential to the Packers offense. But one of Matthew Golden and Jayden Reed is going to be a fantasy difference maker and elevate to the point where if you're not having them in your lineup every week, you're certainly thinking about it. When you're saying receiver 47 and 52 in the case of Jayden Reed and Matthew Golden, that's not guaranteed starter on your roster. And Jayden Reed, both his rookie year and second year, were in the first 9 weeks of the season guaranteed starters in your lineup. What I can't explain in year 2 was why he wasn't more involved towards the latter half of the year. You had Jordan Love back. He was a little bit more healthy to that point. The schedule was tougher. But if we think Jayden Reed is as good of an offensive player as I think he is, and the offense is as good as I think they are, and I still think Matt LaFleur is, if he's not top 10, if he's not top 5, he's top 10 among offensive coordinators and coaches, then why wasn't Reed more involved? And I don't think there is an answer other than Matt LaFleur doing coach speak at the end of the season saying, yeah, there should have been more times when we got Jayden Reed involved and we didn't. Well, Matt, you're the coach. You are the play caller. Get him more involved. Why aren't you? What is happening that Jayden Reed doesn't become more of a factor? And there's a lot of things in my mind. I think there was a downside of Jordan Love in progression, both literally reading the field, but also how he plays as a quarterback. Maybe that's due to injury. Maybe that's due to something else. I think that's also partially because there wasn't a lot of confidence overall in those receivers. Jayden Reed's drop rate was one of the highest in the league, along with Dontavian Wicks. You had Romeo Doubs missing time due to concussion and other things. It was kind of a hodgepodge of worst case scenarios of individuality all put together in one group. And if maybe X, Y, and Z thing were solved, if one of those bad hodgepodge things didn't happen, that's a beneficial scenario. So I'm betting on the idea that it's just basically a roll of the dice. Yeah, all these random circumstances that created one of the worst receiving groups you could have relative to talent last year won't happen again. And who benefits in that scenario, whether it be Matthew Golden or Jayden Reed? I think it's the correct call. And again, I go back to I would rather have that upside play, that ceiling play, than Jakobi Meyers.
Yeah, I just think we've swung too far in the negative direction for Jayden Reed. I think we're basing it too much off the second half of last year. And there are a number of factors you can point to. I will say he was only losing about 1.5 targets per game over the second half compared to the first half, because he was outpacing, I think, the expectation on a lot of those target numbers. It's not like he had these big games early on where he's getting 10, 12 targets. It was, 4 for 138 on 6 targets, 7 for 139 on 8 targets, 5 for 113 on 6. So I think we knew that was drying up. But the other thing, and you know this as well as anybody, we talked about this a ton at the time. Green Bay, one, went very run heavy toward the end of the year. 2, they just weren't running that many plays. Like, there were all these games where, they were running like 48 plays, 49 plays, and half of them are runs. Like, just look at the raw attempt numbers for Jordan Love. It's not like he was throwing it to anybody else. Like, starting week 10, these are, I'm just cherry picking some games here. 17 attempts, 23 attempts, 20 attempts, 27 attempts, 12 attempts in that Bears game where I believe was he pulled at the end of that one?
He got injured. There's that groin injury on part of it. But
that was one that they couldn't decide if they wanted to try or not. So maybe we'll throw that one out. But the point is, they were not whipping the ball around 38 times per game, and Jayden Reed just wasn't involved. There was just not passing volume in general. I think they have to fix that. I think they know they have to fix that. And I think Jayden Reed is their best option to do that.
And it could simply be Matt LaFleur knew Jordan Love wasn't healthy, and the best chance for the team to win was getting Josh Jacobs more involved. We know that the offense is already run-oriented even when Jordan Love's healthy. Think back to that second half of his first year starting. It was still a lot of Aaron Jones that was being kind of the catalyst for that near upset win over the Niners in the divisional round. The addition of Josh Jacobs just gave the Packers another solution in the season, in which, again, a hodgepodge of different things that had mired together and made everything kind of downtrodden. I don't know if the offense will be more pass heavy than run heavy, but in the event that they're trying to protect Love, and I'm saying that deliberately, protect him via injury or protect him bad play, running the ball can make a difference. And that's, I completely agree with you. It's worth the upside call, if nothing else.
Yeah, I think it was the right way for the Packers to operate over the second half because they kind of had to, because I don't think Jordan Love was ever really fully healthy. Even when he was healthy, he wasn't playing well. And Josh Jacobs just gave you a get-out-of-jail-free card against some of these bad teams that they were playing. But what I'm saying is I think they recognize that that's not a path to contending for a Super Bowl. Maybe that's enough to get you to 9 or 10 wins. Maybe that gets you in the playoffs. You basically can't baby your quarterback and baby your offense all next season. I think they're going to have to reopen it up like they were earlier in the year and certainly toward the end of Jordan Love's first year as a starter. Anyway, we'll table the Packers talk for now. I do want to hit a question in the chat. You mentioned TJ Hockenson. You laid out a nice case for him. Mile High Luke chimed in and said, would you take TJ Hockenson or Mark Andrews?
Yeah, and I had answered Hockenson pretty clearly. Now, to be clear, the ADP difference is pretty substantial. I want to say, at least in the underdog best balls I've done, it's probably about a 2-round difference in ADP. I always like doing the Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely stack, because then you're knowing you're going to get a top 3 Ravens weapon at any point, and Isaiah Likely is still drafted pretty highly relative to what his role would be in the offense, but I'm going to get a top tight end option out of that. You are still committing one of your 18 roster spots to another tight end on the same team in that instance. So Hockenson all the way for me. Again, half-point PPR underdog is theoretically less valuable than what I think Hockenson will be, but I go back 2 years ago. He was tight end 3 in most formats, along with Kelsey and rookie year Sam Laporta. I think Hockenson will be involved in that offense. Nothing has changed. And we've seen Mark Andrews get phased out at different times, and poor play, frankly, over the past, I would say, like last 2 seasons to end the seasons for Mark Andrews. Like it's just, we're going on the wrong trajectory for him that I don't want to go that Mark Andrews direction.
All right, back to you. Who's next on your list?
All right, so what if I offered you a receiver who has 2 80-plus reception seasons, but it's never maxed out more than 140 targets? And I told you that guy absolutely is going over 140 targets and will be the number 1 receiver in that offense. That sounds pretty enticing, right, Nick?
I would say it does, yeah.
Okay. Now you can say, well, they don't have a quarterback, and that's true because right now Mason Rudolph for the Steelers is your top Pittsburgh option. But even if it is Mason Rudolph, I will point to you, case in point example is Jakobi Brissett from a couple of years ago. I keep saying this over and over. One of the worst passing offenses, what we presumed to be for the Browns when Deshaun Watson was initially suspended those 12 games, Amari Cooper was still producing from a fantasy perspective. That's your DK Metcalf this year. And I don't know if DK Metcalf elevates into that DJ Moore back into the second round spot, like I was kind of suggesting. But at the moment, there is no other receiver for the Steelers, and it can't just be Jalen Warren and Caleb Johnson. I like Pat Freiermuth to a certain extent, and you could talk me into a Roman Wilson if that's an opportunity, but Metcalf is going to get at least 180 targets, whether it be Mason Rudolph or otherwise. And I actually kind of say, hey, we saw it last year with Mac Jones. You have a bad quarterback. They sometimes singularly throw it to the one asset that they know they can have confidence in, DK Metcalf. I think DK Metcalf is the quintessential. If the answer isn't Chris Olave as to the boomiest bust player, DK Metcalf has a very obvious boom, but a very relatively safe floor ceiling. Even with the Seahawks, he was pretty typically a 1,000-yard receiver, close to it for 6 of the past 7 seasons. Metcalf is going to be a critical factor for that offense that has 0 other receivers. And the Steelers' schedule also pretty tough. Division also pretty tough. They might have to pass the ball a decent amount. I think Metcalf blows past the 140 targets, and I think will be probably close to 100 reception receiver, if not more than 1,200 receiving yards at that spot.
And this is irrespective of whether Aaron Rodgers is there.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
I think that if Aaron Rodgers is there, it doesn't add that much more of a ceiling. Maybe it's a hot take because Aaron Rodgers is definitely a better quarterback than Mason Rudolph. But I'm just saying it is absolutely possible in the worst case scenario where Rudolph is the quarterback that Metcalf is still going to be totally fantasy relevant and a complete buy at his ADP right now, which is, I would say, 5th round, 4th round range.
Yeah, he's going pick 54 overall right now at the NFFC. That makes him wide receiver 25. So this is a great opportunity, Joe, to play a who would you rather draft? I'm going to give you the guys who are going directly above DK Metcalf. Metcalf or Devontae Smith?
I'm taking Metcalf over Devontae Smith.
Metcalf or Xavier Worthy?
Metcalf for sure over Xavier Worthy, although I get it in best ball, and especially if you want to do a Chiefs build.
Yeah, I'm
okay with that, but I'm taking Metcalf.
Metcalf or Cortland Sutton, who's going about 7 picks ahead?
Metcalf as well, too. Okay. That's the scenario where you could say Cortland Sutton is going to be the same to DK Metcalf. Best case scenario for Metcalf is probably what Cortland Sutton did last year. But I think there's still even more of a ceiling yet to a guy that I think is going to be, has proven to be at least a reception hog for that offense.
Okay. So you think he should be closer to Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, DJ Moore, Rashee Rice territory?
Yep. Okay. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. I like it. That's a good one. That was not one that was on my radar whatsoever. All right. We're going to go a little bit deeper here, Joe. And this is maybe more of what you would think of with a traditional breakout. Keon Coleman for the Buffalo
Bills. On my
Bills.
list. Yes.
Keon Coleman. And look, this is more of a bet on the talent than anything else. It's a bet on him relative to the other names in that wide receiver core. He plays in one of the best offenses with one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, a team that had Mac Hollins lead in receiving touchdowns a year ago. They didn't, to me, really bring in anybody who worries me too much in terms of target snap competition. Like they brought in like two guys who are very similar in terms of like whatever team brings them in is always optimistic. Elijah Moore and Josh Palmer. Like I've been all over Josh Palmer. Always thought he was going to break out. I've been totally wrong. He had every opportunity to do so with the Chargers and just hasn't. Curtis Samuel is still on this roster. He was kind of a non-factor last year. I'm surprised to see Laviska Shenault is currently a Buffalo Bill, but as of right now, Keon Coleman is your wide receiver too. Now, it is a team that likes to use depth. They do like to spread the ball around. I recognize all that, but I think there's enough there. When you look at the physical profile, when you look at the jump ball ability, I know the separation numbers aren't great for Keon Coleman, but if you're searching for, okay, who has the talent to really ascend in year two, and you're looking at guys who are, in the wide receiver 50 plus range, he's the guy who really stands out to me, right? Otherwise it's a lot of veterans. It's a lot of retreads. It's a lot of, I guess Marvin Mims is the number 2 receiver in Denver types. So I know the rookie year production, there's not a whole lot there that's going to be overly encouraging, but I think there's a leap to come here. I don't think it's completely outrageous that Keon Coleman could give you 800 yards and 5 or 6 touchdowns. And that would be a significant jump from where he's going right now.
Yeah. That's the Darnell Mooney thing. I mean, that's my case point example from last year. Darnell Mooney was, I think, a little bit cheaper. He was more like a round 12 guy. And I see Keon Coleman like round 9 or 10. I will add Rashod Bateman to this list. And I think in a lot of ways, the Keon Coleman, Rashod Bateman conversation is similar.
Yeah.
We've seeded a bit more with Bateman, but Bateman's been in the league a little bit longer. So that's partially why, but you can do a lot worse if you need a wide receiver 5. And I think this applies both to best ball and redraft, by the way. I'll get to the redraft part in a second, but you can do a lot worse in betting on one of the best offenses in the NFL. You can conventionally assume both the Ravens and Bills will once again be at minimum a top 8 offense entering the season, maybe top 10. You could say, well, I don't know if it's going to be Dalton Kincaid or Khalil Shakir, or maybe that's one of these guys they signed, the Bills, that will be better offensively. Maybe you're just going to go ahead and see James Cook get 14 touchdowns again. It's all possible. But there's a cheap way to gamble on that, which is what you're doing when you're drafting Keon Coleman in round 9 or 10. And there is the draft capital investment. I could say, oh, Joe, he was a second round pick. It's like the second pick in the second round. Stop that. Yeah. He's a first round selection in a receiving tier that had Xavier Get and Xavier Worthy be included in that mix along other teams. And I guess Jalen Polk, if you really want to get gross with this, with the Patriots. But I think the Bills are committed to making sure Keon Coleman has a role. And unlike the Packers, which Matt LaFleur seems hell-bent on making these guys stay in that role, I think the Bills need somebody to emerge past that, whether it be Shakir, Josh Palmer, one of these other guys they signed, or more conventionally, the guy they invested a lot of draft capital in Keon Coleman. So I'm with you on that one. Bateman feels the same way too. I had Keon Coleman on my list. I'll just throw Bateman into this mix, that if Keon Coleman or Bateman do struggle, we're talking about people that you can pretty easily cut. And I think there is value in that in a redraft perspective that, okay, well, yeah, Keon Coleman for the first 5 weeks only has 12 receptions for 200 yards. Okay. I mean, we could probably find that for the next Juwan Jennings waiver wire stash from last year. And same goes for Rashod Bateman too. Yeah. But I think towards the latter half of last season for the Ravens, Rashod Bateman really proved to be a significant factor for that offense. And if you think the Mark Andrews decline is imminent, like I do, I would sooner assume Rashod Bateman gets to be a factor, if not deep threat wise for best ball, a more 5 for 60 yard safety net Darnell Mooney, kind of what the Falcons did last year. I know DeAndre Hopkins is there. I don't care. I think Rashod Bateman also kind of fits in that mix. Yeah, I think that's a good one. And I'm surprised that we haven't seen a little more helium just in reaction to last year with Bateman. And look, is he putting up 9 touchdowns again? Probably not. I mean, there were a lot of kind of best case splash moments for Rashod Bateman. But I mean, he's going well after Keon Coleman. We're talking like almost 2.5 rounds after Coleman. Pick 168 right now, behind Jalen McMillan, behind Trey Harris, behind Hollywood. Just barely ahead of Keenan Allen is what we're talking about. So I like taking a stab on both of those guys. And as far as Coleman goes, we're talking mid round 11. He's available in round 12 in a lot of leagues. Like there's not.
if this goes awry, which it very well could, your league is not hinging on this necessarily. But I think, I think what you mentioned with the redistribution of some of these touchdowns, right? Like James Cook is not putting up that level of touchdown production, right. And the chances that it's as evenly distributed as it was among these receivers last year, I don't think that happens again. Matt Collins isn't even there anymore. Amari Cooper's a non-factor. So yeah, I like that one, and I like tying it into Bateman. All right, I got a few more names. I'm curious to see who's left on your list. Let's
I have one more veteran and then a few of the rookies if we want to.
Okay, let's go to the veteran first.
So to truly answer your question as to like who's going to outplay their ADP, who has a splash opportunity, ironically, it's nothing to do with the young player. It's going to be an older one, a Nick Chubb, who is outside of the top 18, at least in underdog best balls right now.
Okay.
Easy call in redraft. If you're to say last pick of my NFFC draft, I'll take Nick Chubb. If he signs with the Bears, David Montgomery has been pretty conventionally drafted around 5 or 6. You're telling me Nick Chubb wouldn't be a 8th round, 9th round selection in that scenario? He would probably be literally neck and neck with DeAndre Swift at the current ADP immediately upon signing. I don't know if that plays out. I happen to think Nick Chubb is really good. And even though he was injured over the last 2 years of his career, I think he's off, or he's returning from that on the relatively healthy side of it. That's still a massive windfall in just redraft capital that you can do right now. I'm telling you, I don't know if this offer will be available come June or July when Nick Chubb potentially signs with a team. But if he does sign with the Bears, we're going to see that ADP jump dramatically. And I want to capitalize it now. Last year, Ezekiel Elliott was kind of the same way. We also had a point where J.K. Dobbins was also effectively free, then signs for the Chargers. I was getting a lot of J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, ironically, in best balls at this point, and it proved to be pretty good for a last pick. So I'm not pitching on Nick Chubb being a top 10 fantasy running back, but I am pitching on the idea that he is free right now, and that will not be the case entering August.
I like that one. I was not thinking about Nick Chubb whatsoever, so good on you to highlight him. The last veteran who I have on my list, Joe, I hate to say it because I still don't really know if I believe in this player, but just situationally, DeAndre Swift, the Bears have done nothing.
Ironic, yeah.
Yeah, the Bears have done nothing to really provide anything in the way of real competition. I don't consider Rashod Johnson to be that. I don't certainly consider Travis Homer to be that. It depends on your level of buy-in to Ben Johnson, the level that you believe this Bears offense is going to improve overall. It sounds like you're buying in on that, at least when it comes to DJ Moore. But just being in scoring situations, having competent coaching, competent play calling, which clearly was not there for most, if not all, of last season. I don't love the player. I'm still semi-skeptical of the offense, but you have to respect the situation that DeAndre Swift is in.
Yeah, and they added a bruiser, I think, in round 7 or priority free agent, Kyle Monungai from Syracuse, who we all get like caught in the rookie lust of stuff. And, he's going to be better than Rashod Johnson. Well, there are people in this chat. There are people on my Twitter mentions 2 years ago telling me how great Rashod Johnson was. So I don't want to like just say, the Syracuse product is going to be necessarily better than Rashod Johnson or immediately falling. It's just the rookie lust. Like I said, it's exactly why I mentioned Nick Chubb, because there are a few other teams like the Cowboys, for example.
Yes.
If Nick Chubb were to sign with the Chargers, then I'd say, man, I mean, like I still would take Nick Chubb with my last pick, but it is not a 10-round difference like what I pitched for Nick Chubb signing with the Bears. But They have such an obvious need for that other ball carrier, that David Montgomery to the Ben Johnson offense. No, by the way, Ben Johnson didn't even like DeAndre Swift. He got rid of him the first chance he could with Jahmyr Gibbs. Right. And you're telling me now he just inherits the situation where he has the running back he didn't like to begin with. I was surprised the Bears didn't make more moves, whether it be Trey Henderson or just somebody else to improve that backfield. I think Ryan Poles got a little bit too big for his britches and twice wasn't reactive enough to trading up to get one of these runs, and twice ran scenarios where runs at the position happened and then they traded down. But that's something they can fix next year. Right now, if the Bears are to be a playoff team, which I think is close to where their win total is at, you need another guy. It can't be Kyle Monungai or Rashod Johnson or Royce Freeman of the world. It has to be Nick Chubb, or DeAndre Swift ends up being just way better than we thought he would be. I don't think it's that option. I'm not drafting a lot of DeAndre Swift. That's the one of this group that I'm pushing back on. Some the right word. I completely understand your logic, but I think Nick Chubb makes far more sense. It's far cheaper in terms of cost acquisition to kind of roll the dice on.
Yeah, I mean, it depends if you're shopping for a running back in round 7, but if you are and you are getting at least for now, definite starter, I think you have to capitalize on that. I'm with you, by the way. I would not be surprised if they were eventually the Nick Chubb team, because like you said, there is history there of Ben Johnson looking for an upgrade at that position. I'm surprised that the Bears didn't even reach if they had to find that upgrade.
I think it's just a Ryan Poles thing. I think Ryan Poles thinks he's smarter than everyone else. Oh, well, the running back will just follow me. The running back that I want for my Wonder Kid head coach will just follow me. Shoot, Judkins went. Oh, Henderson went. Oh, crap. Okay, so we'll do this again when we get to RJ. Oh, he went in the second round too. Like that. That's I sure want Ryan Poles. They're not going to show you that one on the HBO Hard Knocks clip of Ryan Poles fumbling the running back position, but that's what I think happened in the draft.
So I want to ask you one more Bears thing, because we've now talked about Swift. We've talked about DJ Moore. I know you're a big Rome Odunze guy, or at least you were coming out of the draft. I was as well. Was pretty underwhelmed by what we saw last season. Is the cost justified right now? Wide receiver 35 in the NFFC, that makes him about the 74th overall pick. So we're talking same range as Waddle, Olave, Addison, Pickens, Ridley, Jawan Jennings.
So I just got my first best ball share of him, and I want to look at the exact scenario that made sense for me to take him. I don't have it pulled up right now, and I don't want to waste the audience's time trying to do that. I think there are only specific builds where I want to do that. In this example, I had pick 6. I took Jahmyr Gibbs, was hoping one of AJ Brown or Drake London would fall. If we're saying what's Joe's draft strategy in the first and second round, I want one running back, one receiver. At pick 6, the opportunity for that to occur doesn't really happen as much if you take a running back first, or like in your first. Unfortunately, Jonathan Taylor was the one that fell to that point. Both AJ Brown and Drake London were gone. Didn't want to go the Brock Bowers route. There was a point where then I was trying to chase upside receivers. And in that instance, if we're thinking Ben Johnson is as good of a coordinator as he is, and I tend to do, I tend to think that even as a Packer fan, I'm optimistic about that. I'm optimistic about the offense for the Bears. Then it's not just DJ Moore that benefits. It's also Odunze too. Now, is Odunze the Jameson Williams? No, but I don't think the offense has to have that role. I think, in fact, there's ways that you can change that, and also offensive philosophies. Maybe Ben Johnson thought, man, it was really tough to win games 45-40 last year. I wish we could have slowed the tempo down a bit more, but Dan Campbell was on me to go ahead and make the punch. And I couldn't do things offensively the way I necessarily wanted to. This is the learning curve of Ben Johnson, the head coach, along with Ben Johnson, the play caller, that we're going to have to kind of find out and learn. I don't want to always take that gamble. I'd prefer not to, but I don't mind Odunze at cost if there are builds that make sense for that.
All right, let's switch over to rookies, Joe. I would guess that you have more rookies on your list than I do. So who are the names that you want to highlight?
I actually put them all together, and I feel very comfortable saying all of Caleb Johnson, Judkins, and then RJ Harvey are going to be guys that outperform their ADP. And I'm saying, when we're recording this podcast in May, if you're doing best balls now, by the time you do more best balls in August, all their ADPs will be higher, even on a platform like Underdog, which pushes down running backs. I couldn't have pounded the table harder for Josh Jacobs last year. And I feel like every one of these running backs is in a similar situation to what Josh Jacobs was as a round 5 pick in Underdog formats. Of the 3, RJ Harvey, Caleb Johnson, and Quinshon Judkins, I think it's Quinshon Judkins that I'm the least excited to draft. And it's typically Caleb Johnson's that is the cheapest of the group. So by default, I'd probably say Caleb Johnson is going to outperform his ADP more than anybody else. But I don't want this to be a Joe doesn't like Quinshon Judkins podcast. I vehemently oppose that. I love all 3 of these guys, and I love all 3 of them at cost right now. But if I'm going best ball wise, I think Caleb Johnson being the cheapest is one I think will easily outperform his ADP. And I feel very confidently RJ Harvey will do similar stuff despite him being a bit more expensive.
So RJ Harvey is going at almost the exact same pick as Travion Henderson. Caleb Johnson, like you said, going a full round plus later than Harvey, almost exactly a round behind Henderson. How do you rank these? I guess I should maybe rephrase that. Like, what are the factors at play here as far as talent versus situation, immediate opportunity, competition for touches? Like, what goes into that?
So the pre-draft process, I liked Travion Henderson the most out of this group, and I thought he went to the worst landing spot of this group. Again, Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Johnson, Travion Henderson, RJ Harvey. I think RJ Harvey, pre-draft wasn't necessarily in that mix, but I think all of us in the draft community and certainly the dynasty community were aware of RJ Harvey. I wasn't at all surprised to see him go into the middle second round where he did for the Broncos. I think there's an opportunity in full point PPR to still buy Travion Henderson in dynasty. I'm completely fine with it as well too. But if he's the most expensive of that group, I can't contend with the fact that I don't really know what that offense will look like with Drake May in year 2, and receivers that I'm not completely bought in with Kyle Williams in particular. There's a large subsection of the dynasty community that loves Kyle Williams. I'm not among that group. I don't mind Stephon Diggs to a certain extent, but it feels like haphazardly built. Yeah. And everyone will want to point to Josh McDaniel, and every year he's been a coordinator. The running back position has X amount of fantasy points catching the ball, receiving it. Ramondre Stevenson can do that too. And from a football perspective, it's valuable to have 2 running backs that can be both runners and receivers. It's also valuable that in the case of Travion Henderson, he's a really good pass blocker. That does not help fantasy-wise, though. And I think from a football functioning perspective, Travion Henderson makes the Patriots offense a lot better. It does not mean Travion Henderson is Jahmyr Gibbs 2.0, like I was hoping he would be on a certain offense. So if Henderson's the most expensive, I'm out on that. And I would much rather take a Caleb Johnson, who's the cheapest. I'm ranking it RJ Harvey, Judkins, and then Caleb Johnson, and Henderson being the last of that group. That's probably how I'm doing it right now.
All right. Any other upside players you want to mention? Are we good here?
That was kind of it with the maxed ADP on the receivers. Travis Hunter on Underdog right now, his ADP is just gross. Even if you are doing a Jags stack, if you feel so inclined to do so, I don't really want to get involved with Ted McMillan at all, especially as a early 4th round pick. I'm not convinced Bryce Young can make that work. So it really is the running backs. And thankfully, it feels like a lot of these rookie running backs fall into this upside scenario, or at least will outplay their ADP that we're kind of focusing on.
All right, we'll wrap it there. Joe, great stuff as always, man. Always appreciate you coming prepared with a great list that always keeps me guessing. We'll keep these episodes coming every Wednesday, mostly on Wednesdays. We'll move it around every now and then, but at least one a week through the NFL offseason. A lot of big things coming over at RotoWire. Make sure you check out the site. You see the code right there if you're watching along on YouTube. YouTube 15. Put that in over at rotowire.com. 15% off any of our RotoWire subscription options. Again, that is YouTube 15 over at rotowire.com. We'll talk to you next week.